Blake's grin thinned, not disappearing all at once, but fading like a stage light slowly dimmed. He shifted in his chair, boot tapping against the leg of the stool, a habit anyone who knew him would recognize as the warning sign. Kelly noticed it too. She'd known Blake long enough, through tours, award shows, backstage chaos, and late-night phone calls, to read the small signals. The audience, however, sensed only a ripple, a subtle change in the air that made a few people straighten in their seats. Kelly leaned forward, elbows resting casually on her knees, her voice still warm but firmer now. She teased him about being stuck in the past, about resisting change in an industry that had reinvented itself 100 times. It was meant to be playful, a nudge, the kind of ribbing friends exchange without thinking twice. Blake chuckled at first, shaking his head, tossing out a quick comeback that earned a laugh. But then Kelly added one more line, an offhand remark about how some artists complain instead of adapting. That was the moment. Blake inhaled slowly, eyes lifting toward the ceiling as if counting to 10. When he looked back at Kelly, the humor in his expression had hardened into something else, controlled, but unmistakably irritated. He replied calmly at first, explaining his point, talking about tradition, about respecting the roots of country music, about how not everything needed to be turned into a viral moment or a streaming algorithm experiment. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight, the kind that comes from someone who has spent decades standing on stages and answering the same questions again and again. Kelly nodded, but she didn't back off. She challenged him, gently but persistently, saying that evolution didn't erase roots, that younger artists deserved space, that audiences had changed. The exchange stayed polite, but the tension thickened with every sentence. The band members exchanged quick glances. A producer off-camera leaned forward, headset pressed tighter against his ear. Blake's foot stopped tapping. He leaned forward now, resting his forearms on his thighs, eyes locked on Kelly. "You know that's not what I'm saying," he replied, his tone sharper than before. The audience laughed nervously, unsure whether they were supposed to. Kelly smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. She reminded him, on air, that debates like this were part of the fun, part of what made conversations real. But Blake wasn't smiling anymore. For a split second, it felt like two worlds were colliding, the polished, upbeat rhythm of a daytime talk show and the raw, unfiltered frustration of someone who felt misunderstood. Blake rubbed a hand over his face, then laughed once, short, humorless. "I came here to talk music," he said, half joking, half not. "Not to get lectured." The word hung there. Lectured. The audience reaction was immediate, a mix of gasps, murmurs, and scattered applause. Kelly raised her eyebrows, surprised but trying to keep things light. She shot back with a playful remark, attempting to steer the moment back into familiar territory. But Blake shook his head, the decision already forming behind his eyes. He sat back, crossed his arms, and for the first time since he'd walked onto the set, he looked uncomfortable. Not angry in a loud, explosive way, but closed off, guarded. Kelly softened her tone, reminding him of their shared history, how many times they'd teased each other worse than this. She laughed, trying to invite him back into the moment. Blake didn't laugh. Instead, he uncrossed his arms, exhaled slowly, and glanced toward the side of the stage. Cameras caught the movement. Viewers at home would later rewind it, analyzing that look frame by frame. Was it frustration? Disappointment, or simply the realization that this conversation wasn't going anywhere he wanted it to? "I think we're just talking past each other," Blake said, standing slightly, then settling back down as if reconsidering. His voice was steady now, almost tired. "And I don't love doing that on TV." Kelly paused. The room felt suddenly very quiet. Even the band stayed still, hands hovering near instruments they wouldn't touch. Kelly nodded, respectful, but she didn't apologize. She simply said that differing opinions were okay, that honest conversations mattered. That's when Blake pushed his chair back. The scrape of metal against the floor was loud enough to cut through the silence. He stood up fully now, adjusting his jacket, offering a tight smile to the audience. Some people clapped automatically, unsure what else to do. Kelly stood too, her expression a mix of concern and disbelief. Hey, Blake," she said, reaching out slightly, not touching him but trying to stop the moment from tipping over the edge. "We're good." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for a brief second the tension softened. There was history there, years of friendship, laughter, shared stages. But the moment had passed. Whatever had been triggered couldn't be untriggered. I know, he replied quietly. I'm gonna step out. He gave the audience a small wave, the kind celebrities use when they don't trust their voices anymore. Then he turned and walked toward the exit at the side of the set. The cameras followed for a second too long before cutting back to Kelly, who stood frozen, hands clasped together, processing what had just happened in real time. The applause faded into awkward silence. Kelly took a breath, forcing a smile as she addressed the audience, promising a quick break. But everyone knew they had just witnessed something unscripted, something real. Backstage, Blake disappeared behind the curtains, the hum of the studio swallowing him up as producers rushed to manage the fallout. And out there, beyond the studio walls, the moment had already begun its second life, being replayed, debated, and dissected by millions who hadn't even seen the full picture yet.